Positive Identity podcast series.
And I am Ron Bush. Thank you for tuning in to our first major interview today, Stephen.
It's super exciting.
Yeah.
So Dr. Debra Warner will be joining us, and Dr. Warner does a ton of unbelievable work dealing with psychotherapy, male trauma. The list goes on, and what we'll do is we'll also provide links at the end of the show to show all of our incredible work, TEDx conferences, Palo Alto, spoke at Geneva. So, we'll do the whole intro thing, once she comes in. But it's going to be a great show, and I'm excited to do it.
Yeah, I'm super excited as well. Stephen, as you know, one of my mentors is a semi-retired Jungian-based psychologist and one of the founding fathers of the LGBTQ Center here and psychology department here. And so just being able to see her videos and hear her talk on male issues around trauma was very powerful for me, just because of one of my exes, and it just resonated a lot. So and especially now with what we got going on in regards to all of the protests, happening across the country. I'm really interested. I have some great questions. I hope are great questions. And I'd love to hear her perspectives on a lot of what is going on today.
Yeah, and Dr. Warner really represents kind of what we're trying to do for the positive identity is that, it's people of every different really racial community, identity. People are Asian, Black, Hispanic, Latino, Latinx, Native, white. Not really focusing. You got to focus on yourselves. We have to make sure we help people who are disadvantaged, marginalized, the whole 9 yards, but helping people who are not like you and creating a society that does that. And Debra, being a woman dealing with male trauma, is sort of emblematic of the type of mentality that we want really society to start going towards.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that something that I think that people of the LGBTQ community would identify with, and this a little bit more than straight males, would be, how toxic masculinity really colors the way that you see yourself, the relationships you have with like father and brother and friends, and how much the perception of identity of self really kind of can confuse people once they've had these traumas, because men are, my mother's Jamaican, my dad's from Aiken, South Carolina. So I was raised, you don't cry, crying is for women, and all these things that I had to overcome that are just not true. And so there's so many people out there that I think struggle with their emotions, not to mention racial issues based off of where they come from and who they were raised by, or who their caregivers were. So I think it's just really powerful for us to be able to have someone to be able to dig a little bit deeper into that and to offer some perspectives on how we all can better interact with each other to hopefully become a better society.
Yeah, it's super interesting because, what we're trying to wrestle with is that, different racial communities deal with masculinity, with being a man, with our trauma in different ways. But there are sort of superstructures that kind of bond us together. And that's kind of sort of what we're thinking about and focusing on today. You've actually had a unique experience, being a man, but also being Black and part of the LGBT community, not just now, but sort of growing up in the 90s and things like that when things were a bit different. And so what was your, because I'll talk about my specific experience as a white guy dealing with masculinity in the white community. I'd be curious about yours, what your specific masculinity experience was like and some of the things that were formative about it.
Wow.
I know we'll get to Dr. Warner very soon, but I think it's important to sort of hear what we think and then jump into her. Right.
Absolutely. I'll say this, thinking about getting onto this podcast through the day, again, being raised, I'm from Philadelphia, and, I'm 51 years old. And so I was raised by an emotionally distant father. And, in an environment where being gay was violently rejected in a lot of cases. And so I don't even, I don't believe in a lot of ways that I actually had a puberty per se, because I was so concerned with my own safety and my own place and how I viewed myself in a society that rejected me in so many different ways. And when you're young and you're so influenceable, I was very confused about what it was to be a man and what it was to be an adult, and how you actually took care of yourself, and what it was like to love, and how you express love to your friends as well as to people that you're interested or you're having a romantic relationship with. So my experiences with masculinity are all over the board. Um, Typically speaking, I think the short answer would be I was raised to be a tough, strong Black man in a racist America. And that's from my father. He was raised in the Jim Crow South, Aiken, South Carolina. And, to his defense, he experienced unthinkable racism that, and by the way, my grandfather Otis was, he was in the service, came back, and he was an alcoholic after that. So my father was the child of an alcoholic. So there is all this emotional trauma that got passed down onto me, based off of who my caregivers were and the religion and all of these things. So masculinity, toxic masculinity, whatever you want to call it, it was always skewed to what society tried to dictate, as well as what my parents felt would best serve me as I grew into an adult, so I would be able to be successful. I think that would be the quick, short answer with that, if that even makes sense.
Yeah, no, these are longer conversations. And so like, I'll talk about myself sort of briefly, thinking of masculinity. So like, I was raised in sort of this dual part, almost a post-masculinity type life within the white community that I sort of grew up with. And that like, it's a very super Christian household. In some ways, it's like this sort of secular Christian sort of merging. And, it was like, all right, there's a moral system, and this is what you got to do. You just follow the moral system. So the idea of like being a man in that moral system wasn't really part of it. It just didn't exist. There's right, there's wrong. There'd be the whole like, you don't hit women, that type of thing. I also lived with a dad who came from Missouri, who was absolutely terrifying at various times. I mean, I feared for my life at various points, and like, it's a longer sort of story to talk about, but there was like, I have to sort of like grow up and be tough, or this guy from Missouri who grew up with a very violent male household, I have to sort of like stand on my own 2 feet with him. But I also grew up with families, like a massive Italian family on my mom's side. I think everyone there's like, I think 50 people in our family by now, not a single divorce. Like, so the sort of weird sort of like male, kind of traditional male role, kind of traditional female role, but there's sort of this nebulous where like people can sort of merge into each other's spaces with understanding that we're here for the marriage, we're here for the team. And so it's very sort of a unique experience. So for me, masculinity, I wouldn't even say sort of a natural type thing. It exists. Yeah, you got to be a man, but also at the same time too, your moral bounds, how you are in a relationship is far more important than what being a man is in a relationship. So,
Right.
That's sort of my experience. And so we heard about Ron's experience. So Ron, before, we really talk about anything else, I think maybe Dr. Warner can jump on in and.
I'm excited. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, and to my brothers and sisters in the LGBTQ community, her hair is fantastic.
Oh no, he's jumping into it.
I don't even know what to do. I should have done something better before I got on the Zoomcast. So just Stephen, introduce. I'm feeling self-conscious.
Yeah, I want some of that hair. My barber just like took the whole thing right off. 3 months off from COVID-19, and no one knows what they're doing anymore. So I'll want to share it my way. All right. So Dr. Warner has such an extensive. Oh, first, hi, Dr. Warner. How you doing?
Hi, Dr. Warner.
Hi, how are you?
Thank you so much once again for taking part of our podcast.
So I'll read, you have such a great record right here. I'll probably read the first 2 paragraphs, and then if there's anything else specifically you want me to bring up, we'll do that. So Dr. Debra Warner is a leading forensic psychologist, popular TED speaker, trauma expert, training professional and author. She addresses diverse topics including PTSD, multicultural therapeutic techniques, gang intervention, prison reform, human trafficking, violence against women, substance abuse, relationships, and mental health. She currently is a professor for the Los Angeles campus of the Chicago School of Professional Psychology's PsyD and Clinical Forensic Psychology, and a sought-out expert witness, psychological evaluator, and consultant. Dr. Warner is also a male trauma expert, spouse of a male survivor, and author of His History, Her Story, a survival guide for spouses of male survivors of sexual abuse and trauma, and Barbara and My Boys. She's devoted her professional efforts to helping men and their loved ones confront and conquer their long-term effects of trauma on the male psyche. She frequently addresses issues related to the Men Too movement and challenging masculinity stereotypes and dismantling stigmas related to male trauma. Dr. Warner, it's an honor to have you.
Oh, it's an honor to be here.
Thank you so much for being a part. I really am. I'm really excited to have you.
Oh, it's awesome. And I love the comment about my hair. I know you want to touch it.
I really do. You have no idea.
Everything.
Just don't even get me started. We're going to just move past that right now.
Yeah, the roller coaster is going downhill. We're flying. All right. So we have a few questions. So obviously we focus on sort of racial communities. Again, what differentiates us? What makes us the same? So if you can sort of talk a bit about like how does male trauma differ across our sort of different racial communities in the United States?
Oh my God. In this climate, how does male trauma differ?
I know it's a big one, but talk about it.
It's funny because I was trying to explain this to my son just the other day, who's 10, and he is really interested in all the stuff going on, and I realized I can't shield him, right? And so I actually showed him a video today of all the things that you can't do when you leave the house when you're Black. Like all the things when you leave that house, what is it you have to do to stay safe? And what's interesting is that his father is white, he looks white, but he's Hispanic, right? And so his dad looked at me completely stunned, like, I don't do those things, right? And so it's interesting when you think about what are the differences. There are just those subtle differences, but it's also how you interact in the world, how you view yourself, and how you think other people view you. So I talk about this thing about self-esteem and self-concept. Self-esteem is how you feel. Your self-concept is how you think you're viewed and how you're showing up in the world, right? How different was that for him to be hearing that? Just a simple thing. Always get a receipt when you buy something from a store. Always get a bag so that they know that they gave it to you, right? Where my husband would say, I don't want the bag, I'm just going to walk out the store. But he doesn't have that fear of the thought of what's going on in the world, right? So it's just, it really, how is it different? It's different according to your experience and your worldview. That is the thing that we need to focus on.
When you say that, so I was at one of the rallies this past weekend, and I had the fortune of that was me, my friend who was there, who's 60 mixed race, 61-year-old gentleman, and three young white guys, and an Asian American. I'm not sure exactly, I'll say 30-ish. We all had very different perspectives on race. So kind of going back to what you were just saying, do you, especially having worked in the prison system and such, do you notice that different regions of the country affect how people perceive race? And do you see, and how, and to be more inclusive with Asian Americans and like your husband, Latin American, and then you have African American and you have white and Native. What are how do you deal with them differently, generally speaking, when you have when you're dealing with somebody like that in or out of the prison system?
Oh my gosh. Another big question. What's interesting is I have the background of working within the federal immigration prison system.
Wow. Gotcha.
So I had people.
You're amazing.
Yeah.
Working everywhere.
I'm busy. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And so, what was interesting was I thought I knew a lot, right? I really did. And then I remember getting transferred on a unit that had people who didn't even speak the language, who were trying to get along here. And then I find out they've been here, right? Been in this country for like 20 years, but yet they're up for deportation to a country they don't even know. But they've adopted all of these traits that go with being in America, right? So they are men in a system that doesn't really want them here, but yet they're going to a system that doesn't really want them there, which would be their country, because they have traits that are different. And in some countries, imagine this, that if you have a past that they don't like, you know, they can shoot you on sight.
Right.
So the masculine part of you that is supposed to be masculine, like it is here in the States, is considered such a taboo that you have to learn to think very quickly how to be different, right? So can you imagine that you've adapted to something so that you can get along in a country, and then you have to change everything? So everything I knew about being Latina man, being a Black man, being even a white man was so different when you looked at it from a factor of being from another country. It brings in another variable. So you have to really think about, how is this person raised, who's around them, and how did they create their script? That's the one thing I always talk about. What is their script for masculinity? Their script may be very different than mine. And if people don't know what scripts are, it is when you're raised, you're a blank slate, really, unless you have an archetype of the hero, like Star Wars, right? And the you know, the prince or the princess or the, you know, right? Okay, all that stuff. But other than that, you learn everything from who's around you. Right? So if your script is, this is masculine, that you have to be the star athlete, you have to be the entrepreneur, you have to speak well, right? You have to act a certain way and be macho or not macho. And imagine if that's your script as in that particular time, with that particular racial background, nationality, whatever you want to call it, you're going to develop patterns that go with that. Right? So it's not just one thing, it's whatever that person's script is. So one of the things I do is I ask them, how do you view yourself, and what you think is masculine? And sometimes when I ask them, I say, give me an example. So that way I'm on the same page. Even in the prison system, I am on the same page. I never assume I know just because I'm Black and they're Black too, or I have a Hispanic husband. I never assume, because I have been very surprised about what the script is.
Right. Stephen,
I think that's great, because I think what you're saying is really great. And Ron, I'll let you jump in a second, is that you can't assume on the outside. You have to hear from people what their script is, what their worldview is, to then be able to make an assessment. So effectively, you're living proof based on your work that actually it's not good for us to perceive something unless we hear from that thing that we're perceiving, or person we're perceiving, what their perception is too.
Yes. And it's interesting because you have one-on-one interactions, which are macro, right? Okay. And then you have micro interactions, right? And so it's like from ecological systems theory, right? And so when you have your one-on-ones and you interact with somebody, it shapes you, makes those scripts. And then you go into environments and that affects the bigger whole, because you have all these people with these different one-on-one interactions. The problem is when they're flawed, right? Then you have these prejudices that go into the institutions that create these macrosystemic issues that eventually blow up because you're not paying attention to, wait, I had that one interaction, that was my micro. What was someone else's?
Oh, wow.
That's the problem. What was someone else's?
Interesting. So, you know, so while you're thinking, did the LGBT, you know, the fight for LGBTQ rights, you know, over the past 8 to 10 years has been quite remarkable, you know, and you know, I was listening to the Malcolm X speech from 1967 called Ballad of the Bullet, where that speech could have actually been given today, and not a word changed. Yeah. Now, there has been spectacular advancements in the fight for equality for African Americans in this country, as well as with the LGBTQ community. But it seems like today it's back to, you know, Black equal rights, you know, African American rights. What would you say would be a good way for, in particular, people whose parents are in the Midwest, people whose parents don't quite understand what systemic racism is, or may not agree with it, or whose script is there's equality for everybody as long as you work hard, these types of things. How would you say is the best way for them to talk to these parental figures, or to these people, to help them better understand what struggle is and what the differences are, and how to be more compassionate and listen more?
How could they understand the struggle? I like to give examples, and this is such a simple one, but people have made all these institutions, they have made all these rules, right? And they have made committees, and they've done all of this at a systemic political level, right?
Right.
How do you really know until you're in someone's home? Right? So imagine you've made all this. My husband has learned what it's like to be with Black people because he's with my family. Right. I have learned what it's like to truly be in a Hispanic household because I'm around him, or I'm around other Hispanic people in their home. Right. So you have to be able to cross that line. I'm not saying that's an easy one. I'm saying, to go be with people in their own element, not just in a professional sense. You truly want to say, a Black person and they're your friend. Do you go to their home? Right. Do you go to their son's softball game? One of the things we did years ago to end some of this was that people were stepping out of their silos and their comfort zone and interacting in the community. There's a great person called Akil Bashir, and he runs a program in Los Angeles called the PCITI, and there are community interventionists, used to be ex-gang members, who go out in the streets because they used to be, and they work with law enforcement, they work with first responders, but they're the first people that are called on the scene, because then they're in the streets with these people and they actually know what it's like, so they can de-escalate the scene. Right? So they took that principle and started doing that. And I remember years ago in the 50s when we had this whole movement, the civil rights movement and all that, and people who were bosses were getting out of their houses and going and being with people. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Years ago, that's what we need to start doing again. Because right now, we're all thinking we got it under control. Clearly, we don't.
Right.
I actually have and I think that's incredible. And you made me think about the idea of being in people's homes. And so I actually have a two-part question. The first one's very fast. So the idea of showing weakness, bringing it back to sort of masculinity, would you say people who are afraid to show weakness, is that a trait that comes from male society that everyone has, or is that just a human trait where women and men just don't want to show weakness or show when things are going wrong or prominently?
I love that question. I talk about this all the time, and it's not about showing weakness. It's what emotion are men allowed to have? There's one. Anger, right? Even if you're saying they're assertive, it's still part of a natural response that's acceptable, right? So if a man will never say, I'm overwhelmed. He'll say, I'm stressed, right? Because to say you're overwhelmed means you are weak. You cannot handle it. You are supposed to take the world on your shoulders and go forth, right? So when you have a woman say, I'm overwhelmed, whatever, people say, okay, right? It's okay to do that. See, that's the difference in our society, right? Unless you turn it and you're someone of color in a work environment, or someone of color in the world, and you're saying those things, then it's looked at as a negative thing. Well, you can't handle it. Maybe you can't have the promotion, or maybe we shouldn't give you that business loan because you're showing some sort of emotion that is seen as weakness. It's defined differently according to gender, but it's seen as weakness. And that's where that whole thing I talk about, how you're seen and how you show up. Right. How are they showing up in the eyes of someone else? You're always on guard with that, because it could change how you go forth in life.
And that's a phenomenal answer, Dr. Warner. And it goes right to the second question of, what if workplaces, because you're talking about, is this employee, can they do it or not? What if we set it up where we went into each other's homes, where essentially it was just part of the job, where the company would go have dinner at someone's homes? And it's people talk about society being more divided than ever, that we're in our cell phones, we're behind computers, we're not how things used to be, where there are more robust communities. But I think your note about you have to understand what someone's life is like to understand what's going on with them. Maybe there's something there where this corporate energy is happening. Maybe you can set things up where we're in each other's homes, but going back to the strength weakness thing, I think it'd be very revealing in ways that people aren't ready for, to see what people's lives are like in their homes. And get
could you imagine if Jeff Bezos went to dinner with one of the warehouse workers that are making $15 an hour, and they prepared the meal and everything? Can you imagine what that would look like? I mean, it's brilliant. What you said is so brilliant. That's what I'm talking
about.
Yeah, it's so brilliant. Yeah, it's so brilliant, but it's so simple, right? I mean, that would say it all. You know, it's that's really powerful. Do you see in our current in the current protests that are happening right now, are you seeing a balance of masculine and feminine energy in what's happening?
That is a difficult question. Do I see a balance of masculine? I see a lot of anger.
Right. Yes.
And I don't know how much that's masculine and feminine. I mean, when he called out for his mom.
Oh God.
I broke, right?
Yeah.
And is that feminine energy coming out of my heart? Because then I became very angry, right? So I don't know what that is. I just know there's a lot of anger that's coming out, and it's coming out on both sides. And I think men and women are handling it differently. They're focusing on different things, right? Where men are focusing on, I want to survive. I want my child to survive. Women are focusing on, I want my child to survive, but they're focusing on issues of keeping things intact, moving forward. Like there's a lot of different thinking patterns that are going on just because we're gender roles are different. We're socialized differently, right? But the one thing that I see more than anything is anger. That's what the rioting and the looting's about. They just want to do something, right? They're angry. They want to do something, even though they have to rebuild back their own community. They want to do something. That's a powerless thing that's going on. And they want to feel like they have some sort of control, right? So it really is an anger that's there, and it's been boiling, and now it's erupted, and now people have to learn how to feel okay in the change. And when you have change, more anger comes. COVID-19 already set something off, right? We just needed.
Oh my gosh,
right? Yeah, so it was lit. Minneapolis lit the dynamite, didn't it?
Right. No, you're 100% right. I guess a follow-up question to that would be, when you were talking, I was just thinking about when I tour a lot. So when I'm talking to white men, I'm actually starting to write something about this now. If I took 10 conversations, 4 out of 10, the white male would say something along the lines of, "I hate white people." Right. And I don't think people understand how deep that statement is, because you're dealing with white males between the ages of 21 and 35 that are saying that. And they feel powerless against how they're being stereotyped. And they're feeling isolated and powerless and helpless. And what are your thoughts on that? And what would you say to white males in particular who are feeling that, especially in the racial climate that we have right now?
It's funny because I have a really good friend at the Chicago School named Josh Weiner, and he's a Jewish white male. And we talk about these topics because when this all happened, last week with Minneapolis, I said, you got to help me understand from your point of view because I am struggling, right?
Right.
And he said, this is a pressure cooker. And I said to myself, in my head, why are all of these white people saying what you said, that they hate white people? And is it guilt? What is it? And he gave me a response, and he's like, no, I feel like there's not a lot I can do. I can keep talking. I can keep saying it. I can keep saying how I feel it. I can keep saying, as a Jewish man, I've felt discriminated too. But also, I feel like, you know, my voice may not be heard because there's so much other stuff going on, right? So it's a powerlessness that goes on. But what happened to me, you know, to see the struggle from him, you know, because he's one of the most open people, my heart broke because I kept seeing all these white people saying, I hate white people. And I don't. See, I know there's some people that aren't right out there that need help, that have a different worldview than me. And that's okay that you have the worldview, but please be open to my worldview that I live in, right? Because I don't hate you because of the way that you were raised. You can't help that. I don't hate you because of the stereotypes and the prejudices you were given. That's the media, that's your family, that's a lot of variables. That you are an individual who can change, who can become autonomous and live in this world. So it breaks my heart to hear that. Because that means you have self-hatred. And I always talk about people of color having self-hatred. Wow. And that's where people don't get, I teach diversity, and that's where people don't get, white people have a culture too. And that culture is that they can't talk about it. That's how I start my first class every time I teach it. And because I want equality, I said, you know what? White people have a culture. I don't care what you say. You can dislike me as a Black woman, but the culture is white people cannot talk about the fact that they notice it. And if they have someone in a room, they can't say the Black guy because they're seen poorly, right? That's sad to me because I am Black. It's okay. But there's a guilt that goes into that, right?
As the
one white guy,
as the one white person, what you
I didn't even notice, Stephen. I didn't even notice.
Well, I don't. Some people listening may be colorblind. I just want to make sure they know what's happening. But you probably have like 3 hours worth of responses from Ron and I to what you just said. So we'll try to sort of focus a lot of this as much as we can. So, you know, speaking about white people, and again, this is what we're sort of figuring out too, is that like anything, when you are surrounded by people that are the shared identity of you, then that identity stops being a thing that matters. So effectively, you see yourself as an individual, or effectively for whiteness, it has been so ubiquitous in American history. People saw themselves as Americans, and now they're starting to see themselves as white for the first time. And so two crazy things are happening. We're seeing this terrifying rise of hate groups where people, they're seeing themselves as white for the first time. And the first response is, how can I do absolutely evil things to people who aren't white on one hand? Then we have people on the sort of other end that, you know, like Ron's talking about, I hate white people for all these terrible things they've done. And what's interesting is that they do feed on each other. Those two formations of whiteness that have happened in really the modern era. Now that sort of white people have sort of lost that ubiquitous, we are what's normal nature. Like, and here's the thing, you know, that's probably something that exists as a 800-pound gorilla in the room that we are going to have to figure out one day. But the thing is this, you know, to say that white people don't have a culture means that we are the normal ones. We are essentially the standard, and you are the other. And I have to think people are intelligent, that subconsciously sends a message that when, you know, a president may say, we're helping all Americans, you know, good to see America doing, and then also Black people, Hispanic people, Asian people are doing well too. I mean, psychologically, that absolutely sends subconscious messages that start pumping into the system in a way that actually sends a message that, well, you're not real full American. You're kind of the outside. And then all of a sudden, it breaks people. And we talk about the paper cuts. You know, I know Ron talked about how all, you know, these white people say they hate white people and all that. White people have a lot that they don't know, and a lot that society has created, that paper cuts, and then, you know, body shots, people who are Black, people of color, you know, throughout the day, you know, let alone throughout the week or month or whatever. And the thing is that what's happening right now is that we're, you know, you talk about trauma, we all have trauma, some more than others, that we must address and help those who are suffering more. But if we look at each other's trauma, what it does is maybe takes away that masculine, you know, no one wants to show weakness thing. If we all show our weakness, we then all start to help each other out in this sort of loopish type way. No, there's a million things to talk about.
You know, Stephen, you cued me into something. And so, Dr. Debra, how would you, for men who don't know what toxic masculinity is, okay, although they may be steeped in it a lot, how would you advise males to be more vulnerable to other males,
Oh boy.
and to be more vulnerable, and the second part, and be more vulnerable to women?
Yeah, please help me, doctor.
Well,
He doesn't want to listen to me.
see, that is very interesting because I get couples I've worked with too, and it's funny because it's not about a man being vulnerable. It's about letting the man accept who he is and how he wants to respond.
Interesting.
And, yes. And
I
so,
love you.
yeah, so let me explain that. Like, sometimes spouses will come in and say, oh, my husband, he just won't communicate with me. He just won't talk to me and whatever. I said, well, how are you approaching him? Mm-hmm. Well, I'm asking him over and over and over again. I said, the one thing that you have to do is walk away. You know why? Because when a man is ready to talk to you, they will approach you and talk to you, especially if they see it's something they want that is important to you. You know why? Because men are fixers. They want to fix it. They want to fix it for the ones they love. Let them be the hunter, you be the gatherer, right? Because that's how men work. Even though it may be a stereotypical way to view it, men are like that. So what I say is, how do you let another man be like that? Men are very good at allowing other men to just sit with it. They hit each other or whatever, and they're done. Women can't do that. They have to keep talking about it, right? Right? And so one of the things I would say to both sides is allow for that space, and for men to be able to come back to another man without feeling shame. That's the one thing that's different with men, is if they come back and they're vulnerable, they feel a sense of shame. And don't feel that sense of shame, because it's okay to talk about emotions, but a lot of times men don't even know how to label their emotions. When I work with clients, the first thing I do is label their emotions with colors, because men can identify colors, right? And then I say, okay, red is hot, yellow is this. We do all of these things so that they can start to saying these colors, so when they talk to other people, even other men, they can identify the emotions that go with it appropriately, besides the anger, besides the assertiveness. So when they go home to their spouses, men or women, they can do that too. But also I teach, okay, but remember, he's coming to you with an emotion. Don't go back and bring something up 5 years ago. Work with the now, because they're coming to you in the now.
I gotta say, Ron, the idea of men like walking around with a color board pointing to things, I just jump right in, Ron. I can't.
No, it's in your head. I don't make them carry it. It's all in your head.
It's called the rainbow flag, Stephen. That's all you have to know.
Oh no. LGBT community, they've been so far ahead of us. We were.
I feel this today. I feel that.
Oh my God! I would not hand a clipboard of colors out and say, "Carry this, point to it." Oh my goodness, the guy would.
It's great. And kind of also going back to something that Stephen was saying earlier. There is a third type of man that I've encountered, and Dr. Debra, I had met and dated for about 2 years a literal white supremacist. Right.
Yeah, that's I know.
Right. When I met, he had recently left the KKK because he realized that, number one, he was gay. Number two, that he loved black men. Okay. We're going to skip through this as quickly as possible.
And he found you.
And he did. And the reason why I asked that question about vulnerable was because when we talked about race, he was so racially, and I don't want to, the only word I can think of is racially ignorant, because the definition of ignorant is not knowing. It is, he was but he was also so hungry for truth.
Yes.
For a different way to look at things. But he didn't want to feel stupid when he asked those questions. And he, when I asked him what he thought about white privilege, you could see his face shatter. And he was like, and the answer, I'll never forget, he was like, I don't got white privilege. It's from Wisconsin, you know? And I was like, what do you mean by that? And he goes, the cops have come, they arrest me just like they arrest you. You know, and he started talking about socioeconomic disparity. He started talking about poverty issues, but he didn't know how to express that, you know? And so, you know, the reason I asked that question, and thank you for that answer, is because there are people who are making that journey.
Yeah.
And it's not pretty, you know, it just is what it is. And their traumas, he was raised by biker gangs and all this other stuff, you know. So his trauma, the script, is it what you called it?
Mm-hmm.
You know, was that he was a racist, yeah. You know. And how do you speak to people? I mean, that's an extreme case, but what would you suggest when you meet people that are on that journey? So, how do you not make, because, you know, when I'm talking to some white people, they just don't know that they're racist. They don't know. I call them subconscious racist. You know, they just don't know. How do you have that conversation? What are good ways for people to engage people that don't see things the way you do in regards to race?
Well, and there's three parts to my answer, but quickly, racism is an act. So you have to look at it as if, do you have prejudice? Do you have stereotypes? Right? Then from those stereotypes, can you have an act? But the act is if you have the power to have an act, okay? The power to be racist, meaning that I run a graduate university. What if I said people who are missing a left hand cannot have a college education? Well, I have had the power to be able to say that at one point, right? But I didn't, because that would have been racist and my own prejudice coming out, right? And then if I did do it, get this, I'd be suppressing them, right? So that means I'd be oppressing them down, putting them down, right? So people don't understand, you have to have the act. So he can have all these prejudices he wants. Does he have the power to be racist? With that said, the fact that he's asking you questions, there are different theories. There's the Black identity model and there's the white identity model. One's by Helms and one's by Cross. You can look those up. And they talk about how someone becomes aware of how the way they look and their identity and how they move past that to become autonomous or have a self-awareness that they do not hurt other people of other races or nationalities. And the first one is contact. He had contact with you. Then he began to ask questions. Then he began to move through a phase of trying to understand himself in the world, right? And then he moved through another phase. Now, we don't know if he's autonomous. I have no idea. But eventually you get to an autonomous place where you realize how you show up in the world and how your actions affect other people in the world in a rippling effect. So by doing that, you understand what white privilege really is. White privilege isn't really the fact that you were born on a different starting line. What it is imagine I won't go into a store and I see people following me, right? This may be cliché, but think about that. I see people following me. Now, I may not have anything on me, right? To have people think, not a big bag, none of that, right? But the fact that I think they're following me because I am Black is something that I live with, right? Someone who is white would think, well, maybe they're following me because I hit the buzzer, or they're not going to immediately think probably it's because they're Black. Right? That's the privilege that people get. It's the idea to go around this world and not have to have those thoughts, because those thoughts affect you in your work. They affect you when you drive your car, right? Because of where you're at, you might get a little nervous. Right? When you're in graduate school, you may not raise your hand because that'll single you out. Or even in college, well, maybe I don't belong here because I'm from the other side of the tracks, right? Okay, so all those things go into what privilege really, really is. Does that make sense?
It totally does. Absolutely. Yeah. How do you feel religion ties into that?
It's a whole nother variable, right?
Right.
It, depending on who you are, religion could have added to who you are racially, right? Or it could not have, right? Or the fact that you are of a certain religion, you might take more of a position of stepping back or going forward, right? So depending on how religion was infused into your script also is how you show up in a situation, right?
That's powerful stuff. Powerful stuff.
So Dr. Warner, so we're probably maybe about like 10 minutes, left together with us. And one of the things that Ron and I really believe for the positive identity is that when someone listens to this podcast, they've just been informed by a number of the things that you said. Right. Now, how can they take action? And when I say take action, what is something that can be done in 15 minutes or 30 seconds? What is something that someone can follow or like, or a couple quick articles they can read, or something they can do that allows them to not just hear this, but to then take information and take action with it? So they're hearing something that can allow them to change the world. And so thinking about some of the stuff, again, focusing really in sort of the male, relationship with the world, and, dealing with men, and obviously we're talking about race and stuff like that. What are some things that people listening to this, we talked about a bunch of different topics. What can we do? Or what can people do? Is there something specific in your mind that's like, this is something that people who are listening could kind of do or take a shot at or donate to or something like that?
There's one thing everybody can do that people may not want to do, but it's so simple. Whenever you're in interaction, listen. I don't mean hear the words. I mean, listen. And then when you respond out of love. You don't have to be in love with them. I'm saying respond in a way that the person feels you genuinely care about what's coming out of their mouth, and analyze that. Say, is this more my point of view coming into it? Or am I truly listening to what they're saying and trying to see their heart? If people can listen in love and do that, the world would change, because we would be trying to understand another point of view.
Wow. That was powerful.
It's not enough to hear, you have to listen.
You have to listen. Yeah.
Everybody can hear noise.
Yeah. You just always feel better when you know someone's heard you. These protests that are in the street, that's Black people trying to be heard.
Yeah.
That's, I don't know if did you see Al Sharpton's eulogy yesterday?
Yeah.
That was super powerful. And seeing and by the way, these young white people that are white Americans, shall I say, that are out protesting also, they want to be heard.
Yeah.
Because they hurt too.
Yeah.
They have Black friends. They date Black people, and they don't know how to face them without shame.
Yeah.
When these are the things that are happening to them, do you feel that as Al Sharpton and a few other leaders have been saying, that we are at a major turning point in race relations in America?
I was trying to explain that to my little 10-year-old,
right.
Who I'm going to have on my show, my YouTube show, Dr. Debra Q&A, because he wants to talk about how this feels from a 10-year-old's perspective.
I love that.
Yes.
That's fantastic.
It's very cute. And he's practicing. And so we had this conversation, and he was so cute in the way he said it. Because he said to me, Mama, if people would just understand what's going on, and it's not just about people. Okay, we don't listen to animals. We don't listen to the warning signs of our planet, right? So things have changed, and we just have to stop. So if all of this is happening for us to stop, that's what's going to make a change. So maybe it's time. That's what he said from a little 10-year-old. So do I see?
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
Optimism. I love the optimism.
Yeah.
First of all, that's the signs of an awesome mom and dad. Let's just go there.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, right?
I just got to give you a high five on that one right there. That's pretty fantastic. Oh my God, yeah. I look forward to seeing that episode for sure.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited to film it, And so I think something's happening. Something's changing. From the COVID to this, the world is not going to be the same. And that gives me such hope and optimism, you know, and because I always think, oh my goodness, you know, what is going to happen next? And then I think something's going to happen. You know, my husband started talking about, he started talking about the Bible, and he started talking about Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah, and how Lot had to go find one righteous man or one good man, right? And he's like, I don't know if there's a good man. And I said, honey, you're a good man. I'm a good man, right? So there it is right there. We found two.
Yeah.
So there's got to be other people out there like us, right? And I said, so that right there gives me hope that there has changed, because you see the world differently. I wouldn't have married you, right? So those little micros, yeah.
And from the gay perspective, there are so many good men out there.
Oh, there it is. We couldn't get away from it. We're sitting.
The streets are littered.
Oh,
they are littered. But also to tell you, that
Grindr profile shut down. This is ridiculous.
There is an organization.
Put you on a timeout.
You're so funny, Grindr. But there is an organization that you should know about. It's called Men's Healing. And they do retreats for male survivors of trauma and violence. And they also have a lot of the gay community on their staff there, helping with all of these issues. And they do these retreats all over the United States. And they're doing Zoom ones now for men to come together and work on those issues we've talked about today of masculinity, of shame, of guilt, and all of that. So that is a great resource. It's ran by Jim Struve. And it is an amazing, amazing organization. It's called Men's Healing. And it's one of those that everybody should look at. And if people also want to come, I'm doing a script conference, which is August 3rd and 4th. And I have it opened by Sheriff McDonald here in Los Angeles. And we are going to be talking about these issues. And the panels are full of people who are consumers to people who are all in different walks of life in law enforcement, or they are therapists, but it's a conference in reverse. The consumers tell the people who are professionals what they need. They're on the same panel, first names, and it's a male survivor trauma conference for men to come and be able to find the resources that they need. And this year's theme is community collaboration. And you can just go to thescriptconference.com and sign up, and it's free. It's free to anybody who wants to go.
I assure you I'll be taking part of that. That's fantastic. And I have some friends of mine that I would love to invite to that. You touched on something with your son. And so I would be remiss not to ask this. To any parents that are listening or watching this, that have children of your age, any advice that you would give them on helping them better understand masculinity, vulnerability, all these different things, that we've been talking about over the past period of time here?
The one thing I can tell any parent is listen to your child. Not just, like I said, hear their words, but even if you don't understand what your child's saying, let them finish. Let them finish speaking. Because a child who feels they're heard are not going to develop all of these anxiety disorders. They're not going to stuff their emotions. They're going to come to you as especially a male child, and be able to articulate to their partner what's going on and not shut down, right? So, and then all of this stuff going on, be real with them. Be open with them. Explain what trauma is. Explain what prejudice is. Explain what racism is. Talk to them about that, instead of saying, oh, let's not tell Johnny. Let's shield Johnny. You know what? When Johnny goes back to school, he's going to hear about it. When Johnny's on the internet and you're not looking, he's going to hear about it. So it's better if you talk to him. It's coming out tomorrow on my YouTube show, Dr. Debra's Q&A on the Listen and Love channel. I had Thomas Gagliano, who is an expert of talking with kids. He has 2 books about it. And I had him actually address this question with me in an interview. So if you go and look at it, you will hear him talk about exactly what to do with your child. And then next week you'll hear my son Lawrence talk about from his little perspective. So you can go and look at that and get all of those questions answered for yourself.
That's amazing.
Can't wait to hear Lawrence. Yeah, that's exciting.
Stephen, do you mind if I have a little follow-up to that one?
Well, Ron's like me. if I was in Ron's position, I would just keep the questions rolling out.
I'm absolutely.
Dr. Warner. So I have a few things to wrap up, so Ron, you first, and then me.
Yeah, besides her hair, I'm just absolutely in love with her. So this is just you don't even know. You just you know what I mean. I am your animal spirit. Okay, let's just go there. You know. So with that being said, and so then everyone's always in a process of improving. You know, hopefully. You know, advice to parents, to include the children, that since we were just on that subject, but advice to people that are on that journey, that are waking up and realizing, even if it was just based off of what we've been talking about here, is, hey, you know what, there's areas that I need to pay attention to, from a psychologist's perspective, and from a mother and from a wife. What would you advise people on how to better get to know themselves in a much deeper level, and how to self-love, self-care?
Oh my God. The first thing is to love yourself. And it's going to sound weird when I say this. Give yourself forgiveness.
Yes.
If you've ever done something you're not ashamed of, or you think about because of all this is going on, forgive yourself. You know, my best friend since I was a little girl texts me and says, if I've ever made you feel unequal, or I've made you feel that you were less than, I apologize for that. And I was touched by this, but then I said, why are you asking me this question? She goes, I'm seeing all of this, and for the first time, I'm realizing how different my life was than yours. And I said, but you have enriched my life. And the fact that you can see that means so much, because now you're on a journey, right? So I thanked her for being on that journey and realizing it. But also, you know, it's really about, you know, being open to seeing it and allowing the process, and knowing you don't have the answers, but forgiving yourself for anything you have done, because that's where the true healing comes in, that you can love yourself no matter what you've done.
Right on. You're amazing. Stephen?
So for people who are listening, for what you can do right now, we've learned a lot. Listen is number one. You know, let's make sure that we're listening to each other, not hearing what somebody's saying, listening to what they're saying. 2, self-forgiveness. I think based on the conversation of even the racial self-hatred sort of sends that message that some of that self-hatred then starts to manifest itself outward. The hatred for yourself for anything of what you've done, and so you have to forgive yourself. And then we have the Scripps Conference. Obviously, that is free to join, and so takes a few seconds. And I think it was a Men's Health. What's the name of the last one?
Healing.
Men's Healing.
Men's Healing, yeah.
Right. And so check those out. Dr. Warner, I'll tell you this: you have made me a better person just listening to you for the last 50 minutes. I feel, I hate to break it to you. You just gave me a bunch of free therapy for myself, but you are wonderful. We cannot say enough about people like you. People like you need to be amplified in your voice. You need to be shared, spread, and what we can do to be on your team. Let us know. You're an incredible person, and thank you so much for coming into the Positivity Podcast. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I second that. On behalf of so many people that I know are going to identify with so much that you've said today. Thank you for taking a few minutes to sit down with us and to discuss and to share your wisdom and your insight on these very complex situations. And if just again, thank you. And please, just to make sure everyone knows, please let everybody know your website, how to reach you, and all that good stuff. And just keep fighting the good fight. You're amazing, and I just really, really appreciate everything you're doing.
Plug your website, Debra. I'm sorry, Dr. Warner.
Go to drdebrawarner.net. drdebrawarner.net. You'll see everything about me, but you can email me directly from the site. But you can also go to Instagram, and it's just Dr. Debra Warner, same with Facebook, and you can send me an instant message and I will respond. I'm also on LinkedIn, but again, it's just my name, Dr. Debra Warner. And every Wednesday, if people want to talk to me on Zoom, you go to either one of those pages. I'm there at 8 a.m. for anyone in the world who wants to drop in and just vent.
Wow, okay.
That is unbelievable.
Yes,
And
since COVID started.
And you have a YouTube channel also?
I have a YouTube channel. It's the Listen and Love channel. So
Listen
please
and
go.
Love.
Yeah, we're trying to drop videos. Listen up. See, I told you. I believe that's the thing. And we drop videos about every Friday or Saturday. So you can just contact me there. But easiest way, you just either Instagram Dr. Debra Warner or just go to drdebrawarner.net.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
On a personal note, what are your plans for the weekend?
It's so funny. Me and my husband do this cute little thing with my son. He owns a Jeep. My husband has owned a Jeep his whole life. So I got him one about 2 years ago. He didn't think I'd actually buy this for him. And so every Saturday, because we've been cooped up in this house, it's been the three of us, me, my son, and the dog. That's four. And all of us get in this Jeep and we drive. Just in this Jeep, I pack a lunch and we sit at the ocean or in the mountains, and that's what we do, and we absolutely love it. We look forward to it. So that is what we do every weekend. And on Sunday, we have been introducing my son to Star Trek and SG-1 and all the sci-fi stuff. Yes. So he knows all of these things. And we watched the Menagerie the other day, and I'm like, no, you got to start with the Menagerie, not at the first part. You got to understand Christopher Pike. And like,
God, this conversation, the nerd level. We have to end this thing. We don't
Comic-Con's my thing.
Dr. Warner, I don't know if my mom's going to appreciate this, but I am up for adoption. Just want to let you know.
It's never too late. It's never too late. Someone's a good mom. It's never too late.
My daughter, you'd have to talk to her because she was adopted.
Okay, fair enough. I'll get on the waiting list.
All right. Well, Dr. Debra Warner, it was a pleasure to meet you.
Such a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us. And this is the Positive Identity podcast series, and we'll see you soon. All right.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day.